Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies, the live video podcast where we like to go beyond the review to take a look at the craft, the story, and the meaning of the films we watch today. Today, we've got a very special episode as part of our ramp up. As part of our ramp up to the Oscars, we're doing a head-to-head thing. Jim and I looked at the 80s and we picked an 80s film that won Best Picture, and that was Jim's call. And he, of course, picked Amadeus, the 1984 film starring Tom Hulce and F. Murray Abraham and a number of other great performers. And I went with a contender, what could have been the 1981 film Raiders of the Lost Ark, and we're going to put them up against each other and kind of talk about which one holds up better now that we're, oh dear Lord, in one case for over 40 years, in another almost 40 years. But I think first I've got to bring on, and we've got another bonus for you, a great friend of the show, our good friend, Mr. Dragon Movie Guy, Brian. And he's going to be on the show, not just to share some of the movies he's looking forward to in March, but also to join us in talking about these two films and helping us decide, if we can, which holds up better. So why don't I do just that? This time I'm going to make sure I unmute them. Let's go to the 3-shot. Hello, everybody, gents. I thought you were on. You're on now.
Woohoo! We can make any noise we want.
Yeah, well, until I mute you again. Brian, how you doing,
everyone.
man?
No, I'm doing really good. Got a new mic ready to go, and
a fancy new mic.
I'm doing very well. Very fancy schmancy, the kind that even pops up into the screen. Hopefully it's good audio.
Well, a shiny unit like that, you should show it off. Okay, well, you know what, guys? Before I get into the social nutrition checklist, et cetera, Jim, why don't we hand it over to you? Of course, there's been a lot going on, and you know what? Why don't you kind of, say a few words about your experience as a Ukrainian Canadian during this very troubled time?
Yeah, it's been quite a rocky week. I've spent way too much time on Twitter. This is sort of a time when even the software we use to broadcast this show has statements about Ukraine and has color-coded word marks and things like that. So it's seeping into everything. When I was at a rally for Ukraine at the Manitoba legislature last night, and it was pretty. I think it was pretty hastily called. There were a few hundred people there, but I've not been a very good Ukrainian. I don't speak the language typically, or not typically. I don't speak the language. My dad wasn't into sort of making me go. My mom was a WASP basically. But it was neat to go there as a Ukrainian to see the people coming together. Unfortunate because of the situation, but all the Ukrainian flags and the wonderful color scheme, the blue and the yellow. But it's been pretty horrifying watching some of the stuff on television, even with some of the pushback that we've witnessed and that everyone has commended the Ukrainian country for. And I've donated myself to the UNHCR, the UN, basically the one that helps the refugees. I think it's a really interesting thing. It's interesting to see people come together, but it's terrible moment for the country still, I think.
Absolutely. Folks, we'll put a link to that in a pinned comment after the show. Glad you brought that up, Jim.
Yeah, and of course I'm wearing my Ukrainian soccer shirt, which is about the only Ukrainian piece of clothing that I have. So there we go.
Well said, Jim. Yeah, folks, we'll put that link to the United Nations Human Crisis, and it's basically it's the same organization within the UN that spawned UNICEF.
Yeah.
Or it might have even been the original history of UNICEF. But we'll be sure we put that link in a pinned comment.
And if you watch where you donate, some of them are doubling the money. For instance, Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively are doubling the American UNHCR donations. I think we're doing it up here for another. So that's just another way to sort of game it a little bit more. Get a little bit more out of it. So.
Fantastic. That's good to know. Okay, let's now that we've dealt with the human misery portion of our show,
yes, exactly.
Let's talk about artistic human misery. Although in one of these films, analogies will abound. Okay, folks, before we really dive in, though, why don't we say hi to Richard L. And he's apparently Katie Fowler is also lurking. So let's welcome them. Let's welcome them both properly. Is that Richard L. and Katie Fowler in the house?
I get the sound effects. Nice.
Gotta give these folks what they not just what they need, what they deserve.
Yes.
What they deserve,
Very
folks.
True.
All right, I am going to we'll jump into we'll go here. Folks, as discussed before, we're taking a look at both Amadeus, bear with me, and Raiders of the Lost Ark. But first we'll start with we're going to start with Amadeus and its social nutrition checklist. And first, of course, whoopsie. Oh, looks like I really kind of...
Spoiler
alerts. All right. Okay, reframe stamp. It was made in 1984 by a guy named Milosh. So about another guy named Wolfgang. So that's a big fat no on reframe stamp. It was, of course, a big studio made picture of the 80s. So it was a union made flick. Did it pass the Bechdel test? No, it did not. No, I know this shocks you, Jim, eh? And was it a class conscious film? Well, it mentioned other classes, but I would argue it was not a class conscious film. So, of course, that leaves us with a score of, sorry, folks, bear with me. You know what? For whatever reason, it is decided it does not want to work. There we go. A score of 25%. I have another, of course, we did mention Raiders of the Lost Ark. You know what, Jim? It's kind of hilarious. Raiders of the Lost Ark had the exact same score. So
same movie, basically.
Yeah. For all intents and purposes, it is the same movie. But back to Amadeus. So I mentioned Tom Hulse, F. Murray Abraham. The log line there is the life, success, and troubles of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, as told by Antonio Salieri, a real person, actually, a real historical figure, the contemporaneous composer who was insanely jealous of Mozart's talent and claimed to have murdered him. Murder.
Oh, there we go. More
now that's That's Amadeus. That's the log line there. No, of course, Raiders of the Lost Ark stars a guy I'm sure a couple of people have heard of. Indiana Jones, I mean, Harrison Ford, amongst others. And anyway, this here's a log line for Raiders of the Lost Ark. In 1936, archaeologist and adventurer Indiana Jones is hired by the U.S. government to find the Ark of the Covenant before Hitler's Nazis can obtain its awesome powers. Awesome powers, folks. So there's basically the whole deal there. Let's get back to our fine folks. Whoopsie. Yeah, everybody. There we are. Let's oh shit. We still have to do GMG's thing. His thing.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
We introed the two movies, so that's
we've
good.
got that out of the way. Now, before we get into the thick of the show, which we've already used up 13 minutes for, DMG, why don't you quickly go through? I believe you had 3 of them that you wanted to talk about. And this wasn't a 10-9-8 situation here. This is you're kind of just random pulls.
Yeah, I'm just kind of changing it up a little bit. If we're talking three films to kind of look at for the month of March, I still do my top 10 list. The top 10 list video is done. I just need to upload it, and it'll be up in about an hour after this podcast is done. Actually, right. So I just said, okay, let's look at 3 of the films coming out in March that will pique the interest a little bit. I think a little bit. So
sounds good.
Yes. So I believe I had it at number 8. There's a film coming out on Netflix that stars Jason Segel, Jesse Plemons, and Lily Collins, where Jesse Plemons is a billionaire CEO, Lily Collins is his wife, and for whatever reason, Jason Segel breaks into their house and wants to steal money, power, something, and they come back home. Sort of like it's a very similar premise as The Ref, the old Dennis Leary movie, except it's not Christmas time, it's summertime or whatever. And he ends up kidnapping or just, capturing and holding for ransom Jesse Plemons and Lily Collins, and he's not really good at it. He's just not very good at the whole kidnapping thing, not really good at the whole, I want a ransom thing.
Yeah. It looks like I really screwed up on the poster, so you're just going to have to tell us it's called Windfall.
Yes, Windfall.
When does it come out on Netflix?
It comes out on March 18th.
Fantastic. All right, how about... go ahead. Sorry, my bad.
No, in at number 5 on my list, you know how much I love superhero movies. One would think that this would be higher up on the list.
I was a little surprised.
In at number 5 is The Bateman. It's Jason Bateman's latest film. Oh wait, no, sorry, it's The Batman, not The Bateman. I love Batman. He's one of my favorite, comic book characters of all time, superheroes of all time. But there's something about the fact that this is a Batman movie. This is the 10th live action Batman movie, and it's coming out in March. It's not coming out at Christmas time. It's not coming out in May or June or July in the heart of summer. It's coming out March 4th, which to me is kind of, it seems it's a bad omen. And the fact that it's 2 hours and 55 minutes, also a bad omen. And also the fact that it's Team Edward, it's not Team Bruce Wayne, it's Team Edward, it's Robert Pattinson as the Caped Crusader. I just, I'm looking forward to it, but
that's great.
So
let's
dark.
keep moving.
Yeah. Yes. So anyway,
we're aware that it is an omen.
Yes. So it looks pretty skillfully done. It is very dark looking. It has a really good cast: Zoe Kravitz, Paul Dano,
that's
Colin Farrell. So great cast. But I have it at number 5. Should be higher, but it is at number 5.
All right.
Number
And then the other one that I've only put the poster up like 8 times is what?
is After Yang, also with Colin Farrell, and this one has Justin H. Min as the titular of Yang. This is a near future, a family. They have a kid, but they also have a robot, and he's a robot manservant, and for whatever reason, he stops working, and they don't know why. Like everything else looks fine.
Like he's on
So
strike, or just the gizmo
he
is
just
not?
freezes. He just sort of, so he stops working, and they have to figure out why. And cinematography looks good. The directing looks good. It's directed by a South Korean director named Kogonada. One of his first, it's not his first feature film, but it's up there. So it looks really good. It's when we don't know a ton about the story, but the cinematography looks good. The family interactions look good, and it's a drama sci-fi film. So, and it's out by A24. So that is number 2 on my list for March.
And when does it come out again, Brian?
This Friday, March 4th.
Fantastic. All right. Same day as your number 5. Interesting to see. Have you seen one quick question before we move on? Have you seen any of these in pre? Like I know you're on the list down there in Las Vegas. You've seen a few movies before they've been released. Are any of these movies on your pre-release list? Have you seen Batman? Have you seen After Yang?
I have not seen either. After Yang was on the film festival circuit, and I did not get to see that one because it was kind of limited in its release. I also did not see the Batman. They did have a showing down here, but I was not not into that screening. So still some COVID restrictions down here.
Bastards. Bastards.
No. So there are still some COVID restrictions down here, even though we are now maskless. But it's sort of hit and miss as to where they are applied. So
Well,
I've not seen those yet.
Okay. All right. Let's move on. Here's what I propose, Jim. And is we do it like any other show. It's just that we'll kind of go back and forth, and DMG will be, kind of almost like our interlocutor. It's like, okay, what do you mean by that? If there's particular things you want to jump in, DMG, go right ahead. I'll kind of offer you that opportunity after Jim and I have done our thing. But yeah, we'll start with we'll do our usual, which is always a quick review. And Jim, why don't you start us with a quick review of Amadeus? Then I'll give a quick little blah 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 on Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Sure,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so Amadeus. This was one that I saw as and both these movies I think we all have sort of personal connections to. So Amadeus I saw as a young film buff, a teenager, and I was probably thinking at the time it made me pretty sophisticated, getting into the world of classical music. But I
what
think
would you have been, 16, 17, Jim?
I don't think I saw it in the theater. It might have been, or I might have rented it. Remember going into a video store and renting a movie cassette.
Adi's Video in the nice boxes.
Something like that, yeah. So when you watch this for the first time, and maybe you don't know much about Mozart, maybe you don't know much about Vienna of the late 18th century, you've heard good things about it. And this one, I think it really lets you in. It's not a remote, classical music can be kind of remote. I mean, it's not really a product of this age. So what it does is tells the story. I mean, and the log line could be, guy writes a bunch of music, dies. That's sort of what I came up with earlier today. Spoiler alert. So right offhand, that's not very promising. Apparently, this Salieri versus Mozart thing that Mozart didn't know about was an urban legend of the time. And then the people who wrote this, just Peter Schaefer, I think is the name, just expounded upon that. It was even written back as far as the 1830s, setting these two up as rivals. So that's sort of an interesting take on it. And yeah, it humanizes both guys. I haven't really seen much of either, aside from Amadeus, Salieri, or Mozart portrayed on. I mean, they might be in some sort of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure or some period piece as a supporting character. But from this, I know the name Salieri, and you hear him on the radio. You used to hear him on CBC radio when they used to play classical music. So I think this is a great entry drug. What's the phrase? It's for like marijuana and stuff.
Gateway drug.
Yes, it's a good gateway drug for classical music if you've got a mind hungry for that kind of thing. And I always remembered specifically, and I'll wrap up here, that beautiful thing when Salieri is first describing Mozart's music, one of his pieces, to the horrified priest, that he's sort of laying out his life story across basically 36 hours. And he just says, these guys come in, these guys come in, these guys come in. And all of a sudden there's a single oboe line, and it just hovers, just a single note. And then that descends into a clarinet. And then, man, that was transformative for me. I thought that was awesome. And so I still remember the effect that it had on me. Anyway, and a great movie,
Okay.
Looks great, everything. So yeah.
All right. Okay. Myself, Raiders of the Lost Ark, which I rewatched just the other night. I'm more impressed with it now than when I picked it. Such a tight movie. And what's fascinating is like any good movie, a scene should advance the plot, reveal character, explore the themes. And this does that in spades. It is so tight. And what's fascinating is how often it retells the same story. If you watch the first 10 minutes of the movie, it is the perfect foreshadowing of how the whole movie's going to play out, how whole set pieces are going to play out, right down to there's the two fools that are part of the party that, once the bad guy goes, well, you picked the wrong friends and now you lose the thing after all the struggles. But he does, as this hero, kind of overcome that. It is, and it's interesting. I commented about this when we first covered it, Jim, over a year and a half ago, was how people kind of get, well, he wasn't successful. And it's like, it's not about the keepers of the Lost Ark. It's about the raiders of the Lost Ark. And his character, that's actually one of the themes it explores about success and what is it and what is, I'm making it sound like an 80s, yuppie movie or something. I don't mean it that way. But yeah, it's so tight that at the end you go, the first 10 minutes told me everything, but in such a way that it's more setting me up properly, reinforcing everything. And so by the end of it, when you're off this ride, interestingly enough, George Lucas's last great film that he ever participated in, you're going, what the heck just happened? I want to go back. Can I just go back to the front of the ride? Also, interestingly, apparently Lucas, it may be apocryphal, but Lucas did comment, that was where he thought, movies are changing. They're just becoming a roller coaster ride. But I would say this is not just a roller coaster ride. It's a great story. It really does do what a great movie does or is supposed to do. And yeah, I think that it's also a perfect case of why the Oscars are ridiculous, because of course you pick this movie. I'm not saying Amadeus isn't worthy of the Oscar it won, but if Amadeus is, this is. So there you go. Brian, before we get into the spoiler zone, anything you want to add or comment on what we were talking about here?
Well, yeah, I think everything we can say has been said about Raiders, because it's one of the one of my greatest films of all time. It's still in the public zeitgeist 40 years later. Amadeus, though, it has a lot of staying power. I was unable to fully rewatch it for this podcast, but I remember watching this film in 7th or 8th grade English class, and loving the Mozart character, the cackling and the jealousy, just the interaction between those two. And you think about it, every once in a while, yeah, the and every once in a while, though, you hear pop culture reference of some guy in R&B albums, like referring out, I'm you're Salieri, I'm Mozart, like something like that, or the Rock Me Amadeus, Rock Me Amadeus, the whole song thing. It makes its way here and there. So even though people don't talk about Amadeus a lot, it is sort of there, just sort of in the back of people's minds, and it does stick around, but not nearly to the level in the public zeitgeist as I think the Indiana Jones films do it, especially Raiders of the Lost Ark. So.
No, great addition. Thanks very much, DMG. That's this format's going to work for us. All right. Of course, this though does mean we're out of the quick review. We don't need that on right now. No, never mind. I do want that on. Always have the branding on. The branding never leaves. It is though time for the spoiler zone.
Here we go.
All right. Let's now go to craft. You know what, Jim? If it's cool with you, I'll start with craft, if that's okay.
Sure.
All right. So this, I think comparing these two in craft is, you can't say one's better than the other. They're just doing two different things in two different worlds. What I will just again sing Raiders praises, and I'm going to actually start with what a lot of people don't, is the performances. And whether it be Alfred Molina and I can't remember the character actor's name, the one who played the other fool following along in that first little short film that sets up the entire film, right down to him not getting the thing he wanted. The idea of just hiring Spielberg and Lucas hired the best always. There is then, if you go into the guys that played the G-men, the guys from the government, Army intelligence, the way and you even see it in that scene, Spielberg holds on them while the star is telling his tale, blah, blah, blah. He holds on them and the way they react to each other. And you know what? It's like, and these guys are they are on screen twice in the whole movie for 3 minutes, maybe. I still use top men, Mr. Jones. Those moments are also iconic. And that is because at every stage, they just hired the best people. Yeah, I do think I have to note, as I was watching, it's like, wow, Jonathan Rhys Davies, known Arab. It's a boy, he looks Egyptian. It is certainly of its time, and it's like, ooh, but that note aside, just how stellar the talent is. The set pieces are amazing, much like some of the other movies we've looked at, guys, whether it be The Matrix or Die Hard, like some of these films that sort of reestablished what film was. I think Raiders did that with sound, like you didn't hear a gun go off like you heard that, you know, it before, if a gun went off, it was crack. It sounded more like an actual gun sounds like on a range or out in the bush or something. No, this ka-chunk, the big, loud, boomy sound of weapons fire, the action sequences, the, you know, yeah, it's again another remarkable thing. But yeah, I think actually the unsung part is the performances of every bit player, the fight around the plane with the guy with the, like, it's like just everything is just so chef's kiss. Jim, why don't I will now hand it to you and
Sure.
Amadeus.
Well, one thing, just one note about Raiders, and I was just sort of rewatching it over the weekend. There's this great 3-shot with Belloc talking to 2 Nazis, and there's the lookout tower in the background just after the explosions on the airfield. And there's a one-take shot in that where Belloc and the 2 Germans are talking, and then the entire crow's nest or the entire tower explodes and goes up in flames. And their markings are just that you can see it perfectly in between Belloc and the one Nazi. And that's a one shot. You get one shot at that, baby. And it was sort of perfectly done. So and props for Karen Allen too. I appreciate her more every time I watch. In terms of sorry, my nose is just itchy all of a sudden. In terms of Amadeus, what struck me was first of all just the look of it, the locations, the total just how in depth it was. There, at no point did it ever seem like and you know, being shot in Prague in the 80s doesn't hurt either, but at no time does it look like a set. Does it look, you know, you're not going to see a Skoda turn around the corner, you know, coming at you at all. It just, there's a devotion, and I can't imagine how much this costs. The wigs and the costumes, and everyone's dressed to the nines. Some of them, my favorite shots are typically, well, not my favorite ones, the bigger ones. So the ones showing almost not a point of view, but looking up at the composer as he conducts, you know, and the lighting is so subdued.
Grander.
So it's beautiful lighting with the tiers of people behind them, and even the shots of Salieri looking back in his box and sort of rubbing his chin and you know, signaling to the other people in charge there. Those are great shots, even when other people are doing it, and they switch up Salieri for Mozart. And then there's this other one with his friend's acting company. They're played by Simon Callow, who's been in a million different things as well.
Recently passed, didn't he?
Did Simon Callow pass?
I'll
look that up. I'll look that up.
I'll find out right now. Continue, Jim. Sorry.
He played Dickens a bunch of times, really poignantly in Doctor Who at one point. But and then our 2 leads, you know, you have F. Murray Abraham basically is Pierce Hawthorne of Vienna. So he's opera as a competitive sport that he takes offense to. And you know, Mozart has no idea just how craven his friend is, and it's sort of heartbreaking when he thanks him, and you know, those scenes of them together. There's a lot of great dialogue in this. There's a lot of great sort of relationships. I like the way the whole thing is based on Salieri telling the story to the clergyman, and that set up, and you can see basically it's the Simpsons version of the clock going around and around, is that it goes from day to night to day. And so it's basically been about like over 24 hours. He's telling his life story. And at the end, the poor clergy, the poor priest is just his body language. He's spent, and he's only been listening. And you get to see the transformation, how insane Salieri has become. And it's also a 2-tiered performance. So he's a sort of a bitter, middle-aged composer who sacrificed everything for his art. And he's sort of set free as an older man, but still, you know, attempting to commit suicide. But he's sort of almost, in telling the story, he's sort of lost it. So that's wonderful. Tom Hulce's there's a lot of scenes of him laughing awkwardly. I think that's to convey a type of social anxiety. But the scenes where he's serious, when he's got control, and when he's composing, one of my favorite scenes is at the end when Salieri's trying to push him to exhaustion, and they're working together, and they're working really well together.
Okay.
And you think to yourself, "Oh, if only, if only." But anyway, so
how is that related to craft? It's like you just blabbed out a long review.
Sorry. In terms of the performances, those guys together in those scenes, when they're having a long, and it's not just a conversation, but it's just sort of a back and forth. They're crafting this opera together. I think that's a beautifully achieved scene there.
Keep going, Jim. Let's just accept that. Jump into the story.
Yeah. So just and then just the music itself is amazing too. Yeah. In terms of the story, it takes this chapter of human history, this chapter of musicology, and it turns it into something evocative. And again, Guy writes music, but they turn it into something a little more than that. It just shows everything that he goes through, everything that Mozart what the music does. Like, these guys are the best at what they do, and it still tortures them. So that's sort of an interesting point that it brings up. And just there, I wrote down joy versus service, and that's sort of two different aspects that these, Mozart writes for joy, Salieri writes for service, almost. And I mean, we can get deeper into that, but that's just
I think you're getting almost into the meaning of the piece, like the themes of it. You know what? I'll skip my stuff because we got 20 minutes left, gents. Okay. Brian, why don't you? What do you think of the story and the craft regarding Amadeus?
Well, it's sort of interesting because it reminds me so much of Good Will Hunting. Amadeus does the jealousy, and there's a line from Stephen. There's a line in there where Stellan Skarsgård is saying, "Okay, 99% of the world looks at the two of us and doesn't see a difference; they just see smart people. But I know that you're that much smarter." When he's talking about Good Will Hunting, there's sort of that same thing going on with Amadeus, where Salieri works his whole life. He worked his way up. He's trained. Obviously, he's better than 99% of the population. But Amadeus is just that much. He's just that top of the 1%. He's the best.
He's the next level.
One of the best in history. Yeah. So, and the fact that both of them know that, but like the random king that's their patron that's paying for all this, how is he supposed to know? He's not a musical theory, classical musical, whatever. But it is that, and it just comes to a head in that scene where Tom Hulse is Amadeus is. He's like, okay, well this is one of your songs. Oh, this is really cute, but what if we did this? And he starts like embellishing his song, and Salieri's just sitting there like he's just burning, and the daggers are coming out of his eyes.
Yeah,
and it's just one of those that it shows, even if you're not a classical music fan, even if you're not whatever. You just see the talent on display.
Yeah.
And people that aren't musical people can see just how much more talented Amadeus is, and how he knows it, and how he rebels it, and how he's shoving his face into it all.
Yeah. Like any arrogant young man. I'm the king. Yes. You all suck.
Yes, but it's more than just the arrogance. It's also the, he may not be a perfect person, but this is where he shines. This is that he knows that he's better than everyone else. He takes it for granted. And it, again, going back to Good Will Hunting, it's sort of like when, the guy, Lambeau is sitting there trying to figure out this thing, and he has all these grad students, and Matt Damon walks in as Will Hunting, and he says, "Oh, this is the solution." And he goes, "Well, wait a minute, how did you?" And then he just lights it on fire. He lights a cigarette with it, like, dude, you have no clue how easy this is for me. So there is a certain thing with genius that's not earned. It's given, it's not earned. Versus the people that are smart and have to work for it and never achieve that top 1% or whatever.
I,
There is sort of an interesting
you know what, and
juxtaposition
that's
there.
it's one of the many things I have a problem with this whole movie. But what I wanted to ask you guys about is, remember, this is all made up. Salieri was a huge supporter of his, helped nurture him, was a fan, an honest to God fan. He was one of the few people who was at his funeral, but that was more in the keeping of the time, right? This was all made up. None of this happened. Mozart had a lot of debt, like a lot of these idiots, but Costanza did not, become a pauper or a sex trade worker or anything. He was not. This is all a construct.
It is sort of funny though, because then that brings back to Seinfeld and why is George the jealous one named Costanza? It just
I suspect because there's absolutely no connection at all. But I want to my question then is this to you guys, given that it's all made up, actually Mozart was created as much as he was gifted. Yes, he was gifted, but without his father's support, without him being identified as a great talent from the get-go and nurtured his whole life. The story doesn't, and that's kind of what I kind of wondering about the story. What is it actually exploring here? Is it, and I mean, it's a pretty effective story, but Jesus, could we have done it any quicker? 3 hours when you add in the extras, it's oh my God.
Well, and we were discussing earlier that the version that was available to us was just the director's cut. The other one was 161
only
minutes, which is
2 hours and 41 minutes for fuck's sakes. And it's only going over his time in Vienna, as he really started to skyrocket,
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a little bit of a pacing issues in the second act, but there's a lot of worrying about the household finances and that sort of thing. So more looking at the practical aspects of their life. But
but even I think is kind of a construct to kind of amp up the drama. They're poor and he can't manage a household, and the forever. I mean, that's human life. I suspect we all know or have at times been living off of credit cards,
Yeah. I mean, I think basically it's just, what I think it's shedding some light on the kinds of lives that these people lead, that because you're the court composer, doesn't mean that you don't have challenges and that sort of things, that there's different things that come up. And earlier I had, like I said, I had, what differentiates your experience? What inspires you? Is it joy? Is it service? In a lot of ways, Salieri approached it like it was not so much a calling, but there's elements of a religious obligation to it, right?
Well,
and
no, because he's more
Mozart,
of a prideful man.
What's that?
I'd say he's more of a prideful man. He says, I want to do this. God, give me, and I will devote myself to you. There's no service there. That is not a man. That is, it totally fits how the character ends up. Because if it was about service, he'd behave more like the actual Salieri did, who was like, well, here's somebody who truly has a gift. I must serve that gift because only God would give that gift. This is a prideful man who, and I think that's actually one of the themes of the piece is what happens when a prideful man who thinks he can bargain with God, God is laughing at him. It's like, I tell you, I give my gifts to who I feel like it.
Yeah, yeah.
And
he threw
of
the
course,
cross on the fire at some point too.
Salieri, 8 kids, at
Yes.
least one mistress that they could establish for a fact. So Salieri, the man, had no problem. He was a creature of joy.
Yeah. But so maybe not service, but there was definitely a different approach for both characters.
Yeah.
They approached what they did differently. And maybe joy isn't even accurate. That's just that's the first thought I had. But there's a heaviness with which Salieri approaches what he does.
It's almost transactional.
Yes, and there's a lightness with which, I just happen to be a guy who was given this gift. I mean, he's boastful and everything else, but there's moments where the mask slips and he just wants to be a dude. I mean, it's Tom Hulce from Animal House. I think he was cast like that for a reason. That's not a cheap shot. I think he was cast as being sort of this, upstart, maybe guy who didn't deserve all the gifts that he was given or worked for or what have you. So just a different approach of the two men.
I think the joyful comment is apropos. I think that is, in many ways, there's a sensual, you got the asceticism of Salieri. I will be a monk. Just give me this religious experience. Like, again, back to that trade, right? And then he's going, have I pissed away my whole life? I'm not getting what I thought God was going to give me. This deal I made up totally in my own head. Yeah. Whereas Mozart in this piece is, he's both gifted and kind of a pig. And,
makes fart jokes
and boastful and all those things. Like, I mean,
there's just something though about the fact that this film is told from Salieri's point of view, and the fact that it's the whole jealousy thing, because we all have things that we're good at, and we all have things that we're good at. We all have things that we love, and if you're lucky, you love the things that you're good at. But no matter how much you love what you're good at, there's always someone who comes along who's more talented. And how do you handle that when you run into that person who's more talented than you?
Absolutely.
It's just sort of
that's part
of the fun of this movie.
Yeah. You're right there. Because Salieri also represents that idea of I've earned what I have. Very a bourgeois value, that he's earned what he has. Who is this young upstart who is everything given to him? Like his gift is given to him. And there's that jealousy of it's not the prodigal son, but it is the good son from the prodigal son. Salieri is this, where's my fatted calf? Where's my party? I've been here loyal. I've lived my life based on this commitment I've made to God. I've been a good courtier. I've been doing all these things. When does my privilege check in? Without being aware that, his whole life has been pretty good, Amadeus. Yeah. And I totally get that. And I think that is part of what they're exploring here. Although I got to admit, I think whether stated or not, this is like any other LA biopic, kind of going, we'll give a good experience for the folks who are going to finance this. And I include Schaefer is, or was, he has passed. Simon Callow has not. He's still with us.
Okay,
Schaefer has passed. He, was a theater guy, but they're the same they're all cut from the same jib. It's like, I'm an artist and this filthy Luca is, and there's that producer who's just trying to screw me. And there's those jealous jerks who are out to get me. And who's this arrogant young pup who's, now the belle of the ball? I think that's going on here too. Like a lot of these LA biopics. Listen, guys, we got to move on.
Sure. I had one really quick question, or one that came up to me in the middle of watching this, and I thought to myself, I wrote it down. I said, "Is Amadeus?" And could be a quick answer. Is Amadeus a superhero movie? It's almost like that M. Night Shyamalan. It's like what's the first Bruce Willis one? Unbreakable.
Yeah.
But in reverse. Like told from the Samuel L. Jackson point of view. Further to, I thought, well, Raiders is kind of a superhero movie. They're both about these men with powers. Anyway, I just thought it was kind of a fun, taken with a grain of salt. Are they both superhero movies?
Okay, I can answer
Origin.
It's stupid easy for Raiders of the Lost Ark. Not a superhero movie. There's nothing super about him. He's a competent man, but he's not an uber man.
Okay.
And Amadeus, maybe in this context, but I think that's almost stretching the definition too much. What do you think, Brian?
Well, I think there's an interesting juxtaposition there between these two movies, even the layers of reality, because Amadeus is, it's kings and courtesans and all this, classical highbrow music. And the film is told by all of these Hollywood elite kind of, things for the express purpose of winning Oscars. This is that type of movie. This is that type of thing, because Amadeus is not the one that's going to break, some Joe Blow 6-pack trucker guy is going to go, I want to watch that movie. Steven Spielberg, on the other hand, when he's talked about New York Times film critic Pauline Kael before, she nailed it with him. She was like, well, he is a guy that is going to come up and have some of the biggest hits of all time. That is one of the most popular amongst the masses, but he may not be the guy that wins a ton of Oscars. He's going to make a ton of movies that most people want to go see that are going to be fun, but they're not necessarily, all of these deep-rooted artistic, consequential works of art. He makes fun, and works its stay up over the decades. Raiders is one of those films, and it's just so well made. But it's not one where you're going to watch Raiders of the Lost Ark and contemplate your reality or differences in reality, class struggle of whatever. It's just two different
but
films.
You're not doing that with this
really well
either.
Done,
yeah, you're not doing that with this. Yeah, but I agree with you. It's a prestige picture. I am, though, looking up the OG box office. The OG box office for Amadeus is $52 million. It did well. Now not Raiders of the Lost Ark well, but it wasn't that was a profitable flick. All right, where are we here? I'm looking for, oh my God. There. Right. I'm sorry. I gotta say right there, just the comparable size of their Wikipedia articles kind of it's Jesus Christ.
Well, as
okay, it had it. It's okay. So it's world. It had over double the worldwide gross. Let's say of it of its year. 212 million versus On Golden Pond, which actually won the Oscar, the best Oscar in that year.
The Loons.
But still, actually, that netted 120.
That's good, Brian.
I think a lot of folks did. There was more box office room for adult films.
Yes,
not adult entertainment.
Yes, grown-up films.
There we go. Okay, guys, we got to wrap it up because so why don't we? Let me take this off before we get into our final thoughts and where we're coming from here. Jim, why don't you tell us what we are looking at?
Oh yeah, it's the end of the month, isn't it?
What's the next movie?
Well, Rob and I are planning to go watch The Batman before next week. So,
sometime between Friday and Sunday, we're gonna go see that flick.
The Batman. Looking good. Looking forward to it. The Batman. That sounds more like Christian Bale, but don't walk into my shot. Anyway, yeah, so that's what we're doing next week, and yeah, should be an interesting one. I'm sure there's plenty that we'll have to talk about with
Okay.
this
One more thing I think we've got to do is before we wrap it all up, get into the director, etc. Folks, if you can all throw a like on this one, if you've enjoyed it, if you're still here, you've enjoyed it, please like it. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And then last but certainly not least, ringy ding that bell. All right. I do want to make one quick grab something from the chat here. Early on, Richard L. made the comment, which is quite funny. What crossover exists between Mozart and Indiana Jones? One thing. Mozart wrote an opera about a magical artifact, the magic flute, while Jones spends lots of time chasing down magical artifacts. When will Jones go after the magic flute? There we go. You do that very well, earlier, DMG. Wait. Well, now you're just now you're doing that. I have a headache. Go back to the.
No, I just so many dirty jokes you want to tell based off of that right there.
as we discussed earlier, I would love to see the two team up. So it'd be like, "Shut up, kid. There's Nazis right here." We should get that as a sound effect.
We gotta move on. Both these, I'm not even going to say both these directors. Of course, they passed.
Pass.
Yeah, they both passed. Let's. I'm going to take over on final thoughts because we basically talked about Amadeus.
Sorry,
it is what it is. Why I'd make the case that of the two, Raiders of the Lost Ark holds up better is not to say that, and I think it's important to draw this distinction, they both hold up really well considering they're 40-year-old movies. One, 41 years old, the other almost 40, 38, getting into the 38th year. They both hold up really well. I think, though, the reason why Amadeus is a really good example of a movie that Hollywood loves to make about itself. And that's what they do. Like, I mean, they're all biopics. This just happens to be a really good one. It's got Hook, what DMG was talking about, Brian, what you were talking about, that grade 7, grade 8 experience, because it is just a really good effing movie. Even its non-heuristicity is fine, because it always triggers you to kind of go, oh, I wonder if that really happened. Was there a Salieri? Oh, my goodness. Apparently, he wasn't the monk, have a hard time with sex. He liked sex. He liked the sex. And he liked Mozart, etc. Whereas...
He put a "the" in front of it. He liked the sex.
The sex. Exactly.
So the Batman refers to it.
But that's, in the end, all Amadeus is a great example of something that Hollywood is just very good at making. And it's a prestige picture, and it's a prestige picture about their most favorite subject, themselves. What am I to do with this genius? I'm just so good, and they just want too much from me and don't understand how brilliant I am. And, I'm that sleazy producer's trying to rip me off, and that hack, that Salieri hack is just trying to make me crazy. Whereas Raiders of the Lost Ark, again, something that we still talk about is part of pop culture in a way that Amadeus isn't. Set a standard in not just action sequences, but sound design. So tight, such a well-told story. Again, Amadeus is like, it was fat at 2 hours and 41 minutes. That it manages to hold our attention is a testament to just how dramatic they made it, but it could have done just as well and maybe better a lot less. Whereas, holy crap, you take a scene out of Raiders, you're gonna hurt that movie because it was so efficiently done. Anyway, Jim, what do
1 hour
what
and
do you
55
think?
minutes, by the way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, an hour and 55 minutes, which is
Yeah.
why the first 10 minutes had to tell the whole movie, because it's just going to throw stuff at you and you've got to be prepped. Sorry, Jim.
well, the fight at the plane happens with 40 minutes left. My memory came in way earlier, but yeah. No, that's I mean, it's a good point. I maybe don't have the same take as I think it's a genuine attempt at a faux biopic, Amadeus is, but these are really kind of, I mean, it's kind of an appley orangey kind of thing, right? But kind of a fun exercise anyway. Yeah, I mean, I can see your point. I think they both hold up really well. I think they both seem like
Absolutely.
movies of their own time. I don't know if these seem like products of the 80s. It's getting late in the show, so I don't want to get too much into that.
Oh, yeah.
In a good way. In a way that maybe it's good, like I'd like my kids to see it at some point.
There's a lot to be said about the meaning of the unintended meaning of Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was very much a Reagan era movie.
Yeah.
In the way Amadeus wasn't. More of a timeless celebration of artistic genius and, how lessers. Jesus. It's such a navel-gazing Hollywood kind of trope, right? Anyway, I do want to, sorry, Jim.
No.
Finish up. We've got one more comment in the chat that I want to bring up, and then we'll kind of wind it up here.
The only other part is that, both movies, rewatching them again, I see new things, like that one shot I was talking about with Belloc and the tower.
Yeah.
This one I noticed Salieri, and I was thinking, I wonder if he's part of his thing is also being an Italian and in an Austrian court. I didn't really pick up on those threads before, but that's a whole other kettle of fish. So there's still worth in watching both of these every few years or so.
No, I think we did. We picked a two great examples of the era. Brian, anything else you want to add quickly?
Yeah, Raiders is it's one of my favorite films of all time, and it's in the zeitgeist so much that I wish this was my observation, but on The Big Bang Theory, they once referred to the fact that Indiana Jones in Raiders of the Lost Ark has zero effect on the story.
Which is
like if Indiana Jones is not there, the same exact things in the story.
No, and that's bullshit. This is what I was referring to earlier. That idea that he had no consequence. First of all, not about Keepers of the Lost Ark. Second, no, it wouldn't have ended up in the States. Germans would have zapped themselves, and other Germans would have gone, "Oh, what a mess. I guess we put that in a box and we'll take it back to our leaders." Right? Like he's still on a German island. How the hell he got it off of there? Who the hell knows? It's Indiana Jones. That idea that Indiana Jones had no impact. It's like we just saw 2 hours of his impact. The fact that the Germans forever, like he was forever gumming up the works. Maybe they finally catch up. But if we saw the movie from Belloc's experience or from the German colonel's experience, any of them, are they going to go, Indiana Jones, it all would have played out the same way? No, they would have been, we would have been off that rock. We wouldn't have been on the boat. We probably would have just flown back to Europe. Jones is the one who
because they wanted
us
to test it on the island. The Nazis wanted to test it on the island before they took
They
it
didn't.
Hitler.
That was Belloc, and I bet you that's a great thing to have that moment. But let's say it did. They all got zapped.
I want to see it.
Then other Germans go, well, how come they haven't come back? And they toddle up there and they go, oh, well, obviously this thing, it does have some power. Let's box it up, send it to Berlin. No longer our problem. Jones has all the impact. Like it's one of those things where it sounds smart until you really walk through it. And again, it's not about Raiders of the Lost Ark. It is about him. And at the end, the two fools, much like in the first movie, the two fools are the ones who screw him because he does not pick good friends. One of the main themes of the film is, and it's constant, it's one of the overt stated themes. So it's, boy, you still picking shitty friends. And that's exactly it. He was doing business with Army intelligence, and they went, thank you very much. Much like Belloc, took it out of his hand. Oh, I don't even have to go into the scary thing. Thanks, Indiana. How does it end for him at the end? The Army going, thank you very much. No, trust us. Top men.
It is an interesting.
That really is. That gets me going when people bring up that Big Bang Theory, because it's like, well, yeah, if you don't watch the movie, if you don't watch the movie and you just pick out, like, cherry pick a couple of plot points, even then, that's just dumb. It sounds smart. It's got that veneer, that feel, what is it, the Colbert thing of truthiness. It's not actually analysis, but boy, it seems like it. Fuck, it's like watching bad Russian fucking retread social media posts. It's like, that's Beirut. You're not blowing up Kiev there, assholes. Anyway,
so tell us what you really think about the Big Bang Theory.
We really,
he loves it.
I love it.
He loves the Big Bang Theory.
I feel guilty about it, but I do love it. Okay, Katie Fowler says, saw a documentary on Mozart. It was also impressive. He could play at the level he did when he was 5, when his hands weren't developed yet to typically withstand that caliber of playing. Yeah, he was certainly a prodigy. Again, born into a class that had a piano kicking around and was able to give him training, All right, guys. First of all, let's say goodbye to everyone in our wonderful chat. And that is, you know what? We got a pretty lean crowd tonight, actually. We've got, of course, the wonderful Katie Fowler. Give her something.
Yay! Sorry, I gave a little subtle piece.
Katie Fowler.
I got to get used to that, having the mic stand in front of me now. So.
Yeah, you do got to get used to that. I get that, especially a pricey mic stand like that. And then, of course, Mr. Richard L.
Hey, guys.
So, folks, thank you all very much. Don't forget that the next movie is The Batman. Comes out on the March 4th. It's only number 5 on DMG's list. It is our first movie that we'll be exploring, though, in March on Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies. DMG, your link is in our description. You'll send me the link, and I'll also pin that in the top comment. And we will, of course, pin the comment, or we'll pin in that top comment a link to contribute to the UN human. It's for refugees.
Yeah.
And my video should be up in about an hour. So.
Okay, groovy, excellent.
Finished
Might get that link in for tomorrow. All right. I think
Slava
that's about
Ukraini.
And that means
glory to Ukraine.
Gotcha. Well, on that note, folks, I am going to stop the stream. Let's all just